What's good with YouTube? You already know Big Flacco with a convict's perspective, and I'm going to slide on through with a little bit of energy. Please hit the like, subscribe, comment, do all those things to help support this channel, and hit that bell notification for future viral content. You know, there's been a lot of videos, a lot of articles that have been done about Daniel Lizard, right? Hernandez, Axilli. But I'm going to give you one that's going to be really detailed account of who he really was. Now, he was originally born in Pittsburgh, California. A year after being born, he moved to Long Beach. He was raised by parents that were very strict and devoted Jehovah's Witnesses. So you know his upbringing was different. He was more middle class. You know, he liked to surf, ride skateboards, do all the things that, you know, kids in the suburbs do. And around the age of 14, he started getting into trouble. Eventually, he ended up getting expelled from school for threatening the vice principal to kill him. So his parents moved him back to Pittsburgh to live with his aunt. Now, because he could move so slick and sly, right, they gave him the name Lizard. He got the name Lizard when he was in Pittsburgh. Now, he first went to prison at the age of 19 years old. And this had to have been sometime like around 85, 84. And he ended up catching a stabbing while he was in there. He actually stabbed an Aryan Brotherhood member. This had occurred in Chino State Prison. Now, he eventually was celled up with some individuals from Texas. Now, I don't know if they were Texas Syndicate members, but they're from Tejas. And they started to teach him the ways of weaponry. Now, people know this. The Texas Syndicate were the ones that brought the plastic pieces to the California Department of Corrections. So he was learning really quick how to make some pieces. And eventually, he used a piece on another inmate. Now, at that time period, Lizard started to identify himself as a Sureño. Now, he was transferred to San Quentin State Prison. While at San Quentin State Prison in 1986, he ran into his long-lost cousin who was from the East Bay from Pittsburgh, Juan Nato Goril, who had worked his way up from a Norteño street soldier to a Nuestra Familia member. Now, Lizard was only saying he was a Sureño when he was pressed, but really he was just a convict trying to do his time. His own cousin started to basically drop the seeds, you know, started trying to explain how the war was and asking him why he was being sued. Why was he a Sureño? And was trying to, you know, give him the education that he had as an NF member into what it really was all about. Now, as Lizard starts to understand the severity of, you know, the Norteño-Sureño war, his cousin tells him, like, Primo, I can't help you. If something kicks off, I can't help you in this war. He says, you can switch sides, right? You're going to have to prove yourself amongst the NF and Norteños, and the Sureños are going to want to kill you. So that's exactly what happened. As Lizard was embraced to be a Norteño, he started to have to put in work. He was stabbing and slashing people that he used to rock with, you know what I'm saying? That he was able to get close to a lot of these Sureños. They utilized that. And Lizard was recognized as a professional. When it came to doing a picada, he could do a hit, not get detected, or they wouldn't even know it was him. That's how good he was. Now, both of them ended up paroling, Nato and Lizard, and they were living together out there. Eventually, his cousin Nato ends up getting pinched on a case and catches 39 years. While out there, he continued to educate Lizard on what being a Norteño was and what the NF was. Now, one thing that was always recognized and known about Lizard was he was always a drug addict. He always liked heroin. And, you know, he was out there doing crimes, you know, trying to have a job, right? And then eventually he ends up catching a case. He had attempted to rob a drug dealer in 1994, fired 3 shots. The police were in the area. They ended up picking him up. Now, Lizard reached out to a Black Guerrilla family member that he knew from when he was doing time in San Quentin about the case that he had just picked up out there in Coco County. Okay, somehow the witnesses ended up not showing up to testify against him. Lizard ended up receiving 6 years in prison. Shortly after arriving to San Quentin, he ended up stabbing a Sureño, Rudolfo Castillo, stabbing him in the neck, almost killing him, which gave him even more notoriety in the prison system. Now, when he got there, Lizard tried to report his status in ranking to Daniel Wino Perez, the one I just had on the show, OG Wino Casajo. Wino rejected his NF status, said it wasn't valid. Wino basically told him that he was going to have to find a way to appeal to the generals and get someone that's going to be willing to sponsor him. That just because he was working with Nato out there in the streets and learning things did not make him an NF member, which Lizard was okay with. It just gave him more of an incentive to try to prove himself. Then out of nowhere, Big R Smiley came, Ramirez, right? And that's where the communication had started. Now, eventually, Big R was moved on by some Sureños and brought into solitary confinement. Apparently, after Big Smiley was gone, there was two Norteños that were disrespecting his name. So Lizard took the initiative to deal with both these individuals with a peace and got away with it. When Art came back from the hole, now when Smiley returned to the section they were in, right? He had heard a lot about Axilli. They were already working together. He was learning education. Big Smiley took the initiative to sponsor Lizard into the NF. And at that time, Lizard became an NF member. Now, around this time, Lizard was ordered to move on an NF dropout named Jeremiah Reese. Now, he ends up beating this dude bloody, man. He just beat the crap out of this dude. And this is the one pegada that he didn't get away with. And I think it's because he he physically beat this dude instead of stabbing him, right? So he ends up for this, gets a shoot term, and gets sent to Pelican Bay. Now, when Lizard got to Pelican Bay, man, he adjusted to the program, followed the procedure, but he ended up having to move on to Celly, which was an individual named Weddle T. Hernandez. Now, this was around 95, 96. Once again, he ended up beating this dude bloody. Now, he was on C facility at that time, right, for a battery on an inmate. Now, he came back out to the line, from my understanding, and from there, he was ordered to cause a lot of chaos and run interference with the correction officers that were running that unit. They were doing cadences, and they were doing a lot of Nahuatl war chants as well. At that time, Lizard started reporting to Cuete, Gerald Rubalcaba. Now, it said around that time he had already ordered 17 inmates to be stabbed, but he had also probably partook in about 10 to 12 stabbings and fights himself. He had proven to be a soldier, right? But also he had proven to be a warrior, one that could wage war, one that could follow procedures and set up shop for the Familia. Now, around the time Lizard was introduced and met Cuete, started working with Cuete. Cuete was the regiment security department. So that means he was pretty much in charge of almost everything that was going on. He had to know about it. He was in charge of it. That's how high ranking of a position that he was holding. Okay. Therefore, this put fucking Lizard in a position to where he could learn from someone that's going to teach him the ropes on a much higher level than he was operating. This is where his leadership qualities started to come into play. Now, around this time, Lizard started writing a female named Kaylin Santiago, also known as Crazy Girl. Now, she lived out there in Boise, Idaho, and she ended up being a huge asset for the NF. She had all the decoding lists. A lot of the money was sent to her. She would deposit in several different banks. She was doing the job that for the NF, basically as a secretary, pretty much, without having that official title. She was a secretary. Now, one of the codes she used to use with her, which they were able to fucking decipher, was the salutation code, which meant certain words would unlock other words. Like for instance, greetings, right? That maybe unlocks every 4 words is a word that you're going to be using. And it's kind of trying to throw them off track, you know what I mean? But eventually, if there isn't a particular code that no one knows, the feds are going to be able to decipher it. And they were able to decipher this code that he was using with Crazy Girl. They were also running, illegal, not illegal, they were running stuff out of a fake attorney office, right? And we're putting all the right stamps on it so it gets to its location untouched and unscathed. Now, Lizard was also involved in a big incident in Pelican Bay amongst the Norteños and Southsiders when the Southsiders attempted to tell the Norteños that they had to wear their shirts. Norteños went, tied pieces to their hands, went out there and handled their fucking business. Dubs has talked about this incident without mentioning names. So he continued to rise to the ranks. He eventually paroles in, I think, 98 or 99. Now, upon returning, he ends up in Corcoran's shoe. Now, this is where my direct involvement comes into play. While there, he was told by Carlitos and Wino, Carlitos from Soho and Wino from Oakland, that he has been put on the hit list. But there was a lot of questions going on about the people that were being put on the list by Cuete, that's why they confronted Axilli Lizard right there in the yard. From there, they started to get reports, so a complaint could be filed and submitted to Pelican Bay. Some of the stuff on those complaints were about unjust killings, right? That eventually led to Cuete being demoted to a Cap 1 status. Now, Wino needed somebody to go out there and set up shop because he was taking care of all the regiments, and that's why Axilli went out there and did, and why he had so much power. He played it smart. You know what I'm saying? I get a call sometime when I get out there from him. He plugs me into the regiment at that time. During this time, he was a full-fledged informant playing both sides. I start talking, having a conversation with him. He gives me a number of Lone Park. He tells me that there's only two individuals that have the authority to give the green light. That's him and Wino. That's it. So whoever he plugged me with to work, they had no authority to give me any type of green lights or send me out on any missions, he said. Because basically I was there to work for the GOP, the General Prisons, which was corny at that time. So Axilli had every regiment reporting to him. He had meetings that were being set up from time to time at motels, different locations, and they were under surveillance 24/7 when they did these things, man. It was crazy. When the indictments hit the streets, it was off the fucking hook. So at that time, Lizard was basically playing both sides. He was sending fucking kites up to Wino Zarowski, then to fucking Pinky. He was putting certain individuals on freeze that didn't need to be put on freeze. He had Lencho fucking stuck over there on freeze. He had Chuco on freeze. And so he'd have certain people telling them that they could not communicate with this person so that they wouldn't get burnt and it wouldn't get revealed what he was doing. As we know, there was a Cap Saloon shooting, murder, that took place when Suave was running that regiment. There's been question marks whether he gave the green light. I've been told that they heard the conversation, right, the FBI has, right, between Axilli and Suave, and it did not sound at all like Axilli even gave the green light. In fact, he was yelling at him about it so viciously that there's no way in hell that Suave acted on Axilli's orders. I know Suave had done time with Suave. Right before this case, I did time with Suave. He was sharp, man, but he was a young C trying to prove himself, man. So I could see him trying to pull the trigger on this issue, Eventually, Operation Black Widow came out, and you had Weddle Grattan, which I'm gonna do a little profile on him as well. You know what I'm saying? Being the other key individual, you had an individual. What's his name? Pancho out there in Santa Rosa. You had fucking Oso, Santa Rosa, Roach, Rock. All these dudes ended up cooperating and flipping. And it made this a very strong case. As we already know, certain individuals got spread out. You had Skip that took an early deal. That was under the directives of the NF. And you had a lot of dudes that took deals that were deemed no good for doing so. So this was a crazy time, man. And, Axilli, pretty much disappeared. And lo and behold, he was working with one of the detectives that took a liking to him for the federal government. And what they were doing with Axilli was they were putting him in different locations like Arkansas, Georgia, South Carolina, areas where they were having new crime with their outside, and they were having them go in there and infiltrate and find out information. He was, like I said, he was a plant, and he was getting paid for doing this. Eventually, he died about 2 years ago, cirrhosis of the liver, and there was always, still to the day of him dying, question marks about was he still using heroin. He was actually out there in Idaho, the Washington area. He was actually out there portraying himself to be a Sureño, from what I heard, man. Trying to push that line years later out there, He had told cops that, to my understanding, a few cops that he was a fucking plant from Joe Morgan's days and all kinds of crazy shit, man. So this dude had some stories on his, man. But the one thing you can't say about Axilli was he a punk as far as with his hands or with a piece. The dude was brutal like that. Vicious. Now, he was really never ever from any Sureño barrio. He only became a Sureño when he went to prison and only if he was pressed and asked. Also, his code name that was being used in reference to him was Rachel. All the Carnales had female names in Corcoran. and that's how they would basically communicate who was doing what, who was where. Lizard was involved in he was supposed to be involved in the planned attacks to take out the district attorneys in Santa Clara County. Him and Happy were supposed to do that because Happy was in trouble. But after they were complete that hit, he was supposed to take out Happy, believe it or not, instantly. Those were the orders that he had got from Quete. Anyways, a little bit more about Daniel Lizard Axilli. I think this is probably one of the more detailed ones about him. You know what I'm saying? I hope you guys enjoyed it. With that said, it's your boy Flacco. I'm gone.